All right, guys. So I think we're gonna get going here. I think we're at about 45, 50 people at least online here. So let's get started with the presentation. So first of all, my name is Luke Benoit. I know some of you or many of you, and I'm a PGA pro. And this is something we just kicked together probably really in the last week or so. I think it was a kind of response to what's going on with we have a kind of an interesting environment with coronavirus going on where a lot of people have, questions about what's going on with tournaments. And also there's an opportunity here to do a lot of learning and maybe some opportunities. When we started scheduling this, we actually didn't really know about what was going on with opening up golf. But, I hope some of you have already had the chance to get out and play. But we kind of did this as kind of a good educational thing. And I think it's a platform that hopefully we can use in the future too. I know it's something my students might look forward to, and hopefully those people that maybe don't know me, you find this useful. So, format, we're going to go through a bunch of different things today. This is all about golf excellence. The age group we're looking at is age 12 to 18. Might have a couple other folks that are online as well that might be younger or older. But really, it's about how can we efficiently get better at golf. And some of this relates to our individual time with coronavirus and what's going on with our lives. Some of it's just general, and I hope that's useful as well. So let's go ahead and kind of jump in, and I'll kind of show you kind of what the process is. First of all, we've got this webinar set up so that you can actually have some Q&A. And I've actually put my own phone number. I wasn't sure that I could get a text or kind of a Q&A going during the presentation, but that is an option. So if you want to do some Q&A through there, you can. If you want to just text me for a question, that's great too. But I recommend if you want to just grab a notebook, maybe it's only one or two things that you find useful. Hopefully it's a couple more than that, but grab a notebook so you can make some notes and find out what's personal for you that could be useful in this presentation. So we're going to have a bunch of quick hitters. Just I'm not going to be super focused tonight. There's going to be 3 or 4 different areas we're going to hit on, and that is kind of about skill development and adaptation, and then creating what we call a personal narrative as a golfer and a person about how you want to play the game, and also how you just want to work at golf or anything you're working at, and then what it really takes to be great. So let's say you're one of those golfers where you have had some success, or you like the game and you're realizing maybe this is your sport you want to excel at. So let's talk about what that's going to take if you want to be really good. The level of dedication, the terms of structure you're going to need, maybe the support system. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Mental game, we'll talk a little bit about that because I know that's always a key issue. I coach a lot of good juniors, and I know from age, really, the mental stuff never goes away. It seems like you think, well, as soon as I get to this level, the mental stuff goes away and it'll be no problem. But the truth is the mental stuff is always there. I'm a 38-year-old PGA pro, and I remember, the struggles I had as a teenager, and I've gotten a lot better at it through experience and some maturation. But I also know that the thing's never done. I still have to work on my mental game. So it's always good to talk about that. And the last topic we're going to look at is speed. But I've got a nice little picture on the left here, and I think this is a good way to jump off is if we look at a bunch of different golfers here. So these are legends of the game. People have won at least one major. Most of them have won 2, 3, or 4. So we've got Sam Snead, we've got Ben Hogan, looks like Byron Nelson. There's Arnold Palmer. Looks like Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, who's won more majors than anybody, Lee Trevino, Johnny Miller, and so on. We can go right on down the list. You can name all these guys if you want. But the point here is there's a lot of different types of swings out there. You see Jim Furyk with the super high elbow, often described as an octopus falling out of a tree. It's a really interesting golf swing. And then you get some lower plane guys, maybe Rory's down there. You get DJ with really high hands and a closed club face. There's a lot of different ways to swing this club. And mechanics are not the thing that are going to separate the great players from the good players. A lot of this is how they work and how they approach the game. Yes, mechanics are very important and speed is very important, but there's different ways to play the game, and we'll talk about that, how much that matters. So let's jump in. A little bit about me. For many of you, this may be the first time you've gotten to know me. I've had a lot of time to be a golfer. I started when I was about 13, and my first golf lesson was with my grandpa. And my grandpa taught me how to curve the ball both ways. He said, well, if you can learn to hook it, learn to slice it, you should be able to hit every shot in between. So I was just a simple physics guy. I learned how to make the ball spin. And if you think about any sport that has a ball, if you can make the ball spin, you can make it curve. And if you understand how to do one big curve and another big curve, you can kind of figure out how to go straight. And that is clearly how I've probably modeled my teaching. The players I coach tend to be very versatile in terms of being able to work the ball. And they don't all need to work the ball that much, but they're very capable of it. And so that's kind of foundational for me. And that really was the only golf lesson I had growing up. After that, I didn't have a lesson until after I turned pro. My family, it wasn't an option to take a lot of lessons. I did play a lot as a kid. And I remember from age 13 when I started playing, I was doing about 200 rounds a year for the next 4 or 5 years. So within 4 years, it was, I was breaking 70. And it was because I really loved the game and I liked being out there and competing. And I realized that it was something that I could totally control my own destiny at. So that's kind of how it worked for me. And so I've had a lot of fun times with golf in terms of the connections I've made and opportunities I've had. And working at Interlock has been fantastic. And now I'm at that point in my career where I really am kind of interested in kind of giving back and trying to do more of these educational things and trying to help kids, especially that really want to be good. I think there is a roadmap there that there's an opportunity to find some shortcuts to if you know what you're doing. And that's where good coaching and education can help out. So that's what this is all about for me. And I will talk to you a little bit about the commercial interest I have at the end, but really this is to me all about helping people out. So let's jump off with Mr. and Mrs. Haverkamp. I'm not going to play this whole clip. I'm just going to get it started.
It's right over there. Go straight in your camera.
But this is from the movie Caddyshack.
Mrs. Haverkamp, you go that way, and it's right over. Mrs. Haverkamp, you need this.
Oh, I might at that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play the whole clip here.
Your ball's right over here, sir.
The point here on this one is that golf is a game that a lot of people play, and they put a lot of time into. And there's plenty of golfers out there at Interlock and in every club around where you put a lot of time into it and you don't end up being that good. And so we're going to talk about why that is the case and how you practice may be a big difference in the results you get. So let's still go ahead and look at expertise and how that's different than just playing a game. So Ericsson, guy named Anders Ericsson, did a bunch of this research early in 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And he's finding out what it takes to be great at anything. And we found out in music or sports or anything, same ideas really apply. And it's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice generally gets you to that point. You can get there faster, especially in sports where maybe a physical dominance can be more helpful. But in largely all sorts of things, this is what it takes: 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. And the big key here is deliberate practice. And if you think about what that means, it means about how you approach the game that you're working on and how you basically fine tune your skills through a structured practice environment. And that's what we're trying to promote here today, is find a way to create some structure that you get the results you want with the time you're putting in. And we know from all the work by Ericsson and others that sometimes you have to choose to actually work on stuff you don't like to do versus doing the fun stuff. So, your grandpa or maybe your dad or mom, they might go play golf and they're just out there playing. They're probably not grinding on the range. They're not using video. They're not grinding on mechanics. They're not spending time hitting putts on the green over and over the way you might. And that is the big difference between what we call deliberate practice and just playing the game and enjoying the leisure activity. And there's no right or wrong about it, but you have to realize that if you're going to take this game on and you want to be really good, that's the sacrifice you have to make. Because I don't think a lot of people enjoy that sort of practice over and over. If you talk to Rory McIlroy, he often talks about how, for him, hitting balls gets boring and he'd rather spend time in the gym. That's more interesting to him. So there are people like that who can maybe grind on the range. I'm a guy, I like to be on the range. It's fun for me. But at a certain point, when I turned pro and I played golf at Gustavus growing up, and then after that I turned pro, I was out there in the mini tours and I was grinding 6 to 8 hours a day. And it got pretty hard for me practicing that much. So That's the part of deliberate practice that if we do it right, it's still going to be hard, but it can be maybe a little more enjoyable and you can be more productive with it. And I think that's the big thing. If you're productive, at least you see that the results are showing off and you continue that work. So let's talk about like how that might be different in other sports, like simply walking. You know, we all learn how to walk when we're young, and walking is a very natural thing, but we've not very few of us have actually trained as walkers. So we're not speed walkers, we're not distance walkers, but we can all do it. And that's just like your grandma or grandpa that might play golf. They can golf, but they haven't trained properly. Same thing for riding a bike or language. You know, we haven't studied it at a deep level. So that's just kind of participating versus training to be an expert. So it does take some, you know, natural talent to be the best in the world at something. But let's say you're just an average talented person with like medium to, you know, slow twitch muscles. Can you learn to be great at golf? Absolutely. And the reason is because you control your own destiny and you can train as hard as you want. This is all your choice. So let's talk a little bit about like adapting to your environment and kind of how that plays a role, because so much of ours are we're shaped by our environments. So at a real simple kind of biological level, you could look at like a cuttlefish here. And cuttlefishes, if they're in a certain background or certain color, they change the color of their background. They adapt very quickly. Your muscles will adapt very quickly. So if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger and you lift weights, you're going to get pretty pumped. It helps to have some steroids maybe, but we all know that we can change our bodies very quickly if we have the right plan there. So we're adaptive that way. Ben Hogan is like the ultimate adaptive player. Ben actually grew up, I don't know if anybody knows about Ben Hogan, but he grew up left-handed. And the only clubs he had access to were right-handed. So he learned how to play right-handed. He talks a lot about his years caddying and how formative they were. And he came out a pretty tough guy. You know, he had to fist fight for getting loops as a kid, many times where he felt like he had no money. And he was the ultimate technician of the game. He learned how to grind it out. He said the secret was in the dirt. Hit a lot of golf balls and figured out a way to play. And, you know, for his whole life, he used to fight a hook and the ball would just keep going left. And he eventually found this cue where he actually cupped his left wrist at the top of the swing, kept the face open, and he started winning, and he started winning a lot. And you could argue that for a brief stretch, he was the most dominant player ever. Then he got in a car accident, changed his trajectory, but even then he was pretty amazing. So there's a guy that maybe didn't have the easiest kind of upbringing, but had some great results out of it. So this guy named Josh Broadway played multiple years on the Nationwide Tour, web.com tour now, and he plays cross-handed. Look at that. And that's not the only guy that's played cross-handed out there. I was at the Junior Ryder Cup a few years ago, I guess 2016, and we had one of the American kids was a kid that was played cross-handed. So there's a lot of things you can overcome in this game, and I'm pointing these things out because I think it's important to know that there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and the bigger thing is how you approach practice and how you approach your kind of structure towards becoming an expert. Last example I have here, I guess it's about 10 years ago, I went up to Bhutan, which is a small country in the Himalayas, and had an opportunity to teach golf to a bunch of kids there. And this kid on the left, he was the best putter that I had ever met. 10-year-old kid that used to take my money. And he actually lived on the golf course. His dad was the superintendent, and he would make money for his family putting against the members. And it was amazing the sort of motivation this kid had when he was putting for his dinner. I mean, this is his best pair of shoes. He could take my money on these greens. He knew how to read them. His stroke was amazing. And what was so interesting and fascinating about this guy was that he would hit the putt and literally walk out of the shot and start chasing that ball because he was ready to pick out of the hole. He was so sure it was going to go in. He didn't need to hold his finish. He didn't need to keep his head down. He just hit the putt and went in. And golf is such a reactive sport in some levels that you can train crazy skill if you do it properly. So these are all examples of adaptations and maybe unusual things that can happen. And as a teaching pro, I'm always just reminding myself and reminding my students that this is more about how you train than having perfect technique. And technique can help a lot. And, our job as teaching pros is to help that technique grow and get easier. But ultimately, this is about training the right way and developing the right narrative and attitude that you can become a champion. So that's how I see it. So jumping onto what we call like the butterfly effect. So that some of these things that you set in motion, if you start playing cross-handed, that's going to change how you deliver the club. You probably hit the ball a little higher, probably have to flip your hands, might promote a little bit of a fade. There's lots of things that might happen if you start playing cross-handed. Like let's now consider like your grip. Like let's say you play like Rory McIlroy with a strong grip growing up. You learn how to twist your hips to match up with that, and you can see you can have what we call a two-cheek impact, so both hips are turned. Or you could play like Corey Pavin, and you play with a weak grip, and you develop incredible hands, but you have no distance. And that's another way to play too. You can see one stays in posture, kind of explodes up out of the shot, turns his hips, keeps his arm close, and one kind of flips the club and uses his hands and is a great shot maker. But one of the shortest players to ever win multiple events. So different ways to play. And you think about that environment that kind of shapes us. So much of that stuff is stuff we can work around. So now I'm highlighting a couple of players I've coached, and the example here is like what you have and what you have access to is going to be something that is maybe limited, but how you take advantage of it is completely up to you. So not all of us are going to have a TrackMan at home. This is Caleb Van Ergen, who is probably the best player or second best player of the class last year. He's, clearly to me, one of the top 10 players in the state. This is how Caleb would practice. He'd send me videos practicing in the backyard, hitting wiffle balls, literally a week or two ago. And I give Caleb such great credit. Like he's at home during coronavirus, got sent home from college here. And he's hitting balls off a mat in socks that are foam balls into a bed sheet in his living room. And this is because Caleb knows this is what I have to do to get better. And I may not have access to a TrackMan. I'd like it, but I can get better doing video and grinding at home, hitting hundreds of balls, foam balls at home. And so when I see kids that are saying, well, I don't have access, this is a great example of one of the best players in Minnesota that finds access and makes it work. So that's Caleb. And this is his sister, Catherine, who was one of the youngest champions in Minnesota, won state high school as a 7th grader. And state am last year. And Catherine, I think, has picked up so much from Caleb and his work ethic, and she's become an incredible worker herself. And it's really fun to see how, sometimes your environment is not about the access you have. It's not about the TrackMan that you have. It's about the people around you and how you learn to create a plan with them and create a culture of both accountability, but also just excellence. And so that's a good example of some students that have really taken this to the next level, although you may not say, hey, they've had great opportunities. So, all right, let's talk generally about kind of building golf skills. So there's a lot of different areas to being great at golf. And I think we spend so much time talking about the stock golf swing. So this is beautiful golf swing, real simple. This is one of my top players. Beautiful golf swing. That's what we all think about when we think about golf. You go on Instagram, that's probably what most of your clips are about. But that's just such a small part of the game. And I think a lot about adaptive swings, which I would consider like a very underrated part, like being able to hit it high, hit it low, hit it right, hit it left, and change speeds really well. And those are such important things. Golf is not a game of hitting perfect 7-irons on the range. It's a game of being able to adapt to the shot you have in front of you. And a key part of my coaching is I create plans for people where they become very flexible in dealing with whatever comes up. So if they got a tree in front of them, they can curve it around the tree and be ready for that. You don't have to hit perfect shots if you can hit the best shot fairly well, if you can choose the right shot. And we think about like, why is Tiger maybe the best ever? Tiger was an incredibly creative player. He kind of learned how to shape the ball around, and he was an artist. I can promise you he wasn't very technical on the golf course because his technical stuff was pretty good. But he was always thinking about, Tiger talked about, if the pin's on the right side of the green, I'm going to start in the middle and fade it to that pin. If it's on the left side, I'm going to start to the middle, shape it to that pin. He still plays that way today. He might favor a few more fades than he did growing up, but it's unbelievable how well he became adaptive. So that's really key. Other areas are course management, making the right choice and choosing the right adaptive shot. Obviously, we have speed and fitness, which is really key, short game. And then putting, and then on the bottom is structure, which is how we put a plan together and how we make ourselves accountable to the goal that we have. So if you don't have a good plan and you can't put that plan into place, you're going to get maybe inconsistent results. So that's what I really strive to do. And I think my change in philosophy has become more important on structure and more variety of skills, and maybe focusing less on the stock swing, because you don't need a beautiful swing to be great at golf. You need an effective swing, and then you need all these other skills along with it. So this is an example of one of my premier players and how he practices. And this is how we set up. He did have access to a TrackMan, and we set up a bunch of different tests that were really demanding for him. So we did a 40-shot full shot random. So that's it had a few drivers, but a lot of just random numbers spitting out. All my practice with my top players is random. We do very little block practice once they have a nice golf swing, because if you can hit 7-irons into a net that are perfect every time, you are ready for something else. You don't need to be doing that 7-iron. That's not effective learning at that point. So we do a lot of random practice. This one's a 20-shot drawn fade with uneven lies. So we get out an orange peel or get a piece of mat that's on level, and every other shot we're switching it up. So you do one with ball above your feet, ball below your feet, and you're doing that while you're also trying to score, and you've got to draw and fade every other shot. So you're doing draw, fade, draw, fade. That's the sort of practice that's very difficult, but it creates incredible sort of flexibility when you're out there on the golf course, because you got every shot you need. We do wedges, so important, especially kind of growing up. You need to have a good feel for just mastering different distances. And I focus so much on 40 to 100 is a key range. And then the better you get, to be honest, maybe the less important that becomes, because golf courses eventually stop giving you 40 to 100 yard shots. You might have a lot more 100 to 120 yard shots. But I think growing up is really key to get very good at those wedge shots. And even at the tour level, it's key. If you go back to Dustin Johnson and his big reason for becoming such a great player, and it was all wedges for him. And he basically played this game, which we do all the time with my players, where we just pick a number out of a hat. It's random number generator. It's okay, 112, and you try to fly at 112 in the air, and you got to be able to do that. And if you can't control the shape, meaning if it's going left or right, if you can't control the shape, you probably won't control the distance very well. So that's how you get great at wedges. And for tour guys, it's key, probably less key than maybe a average 12 or 15-year-old, but it's still very important for scoring and making birdies. Bad numbers is basically working on the numbers that are right in between clubs. So if your pitching wedge goes 124 and your 9-iron is 139, let's do 131, which is right in between. And then you decide, what are my strategies in between clubs? And if you don't work on that in the winter and have some good process for that, it's a lot harder in the summer to adjust. So we work on that all winter, whether it's choke down, or for me, I like to change shape a little bit, maybe play it a little back and maybe draw it. That's a great one. Or, maybe it's just shorten your swing. You got to have a good strategy that's effective for you. And ideally, you've got a couple of different strategies. Like one would be, if you're into the wind, how much you play it. Well, you probably want to draw it. If you're downwind, maybe you fade it, take a little bit less club. A lot of different ways to do that, but you got to have some good strategies. So drivers, and that's basically the gist of that. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. All right, so specific concepts of training. Concepts of training are all about being able to understand what does it take in terms of each day and how you're going to train. So we know that once you get 2, 3, 4 hours in, your attention really goes downhill. So your first 2 hours are very effective, and then after that, it starts to get a little bit harder for a lot of people. Can you effectively train for 8 hours a day? Yes, but there's a marginal utility on that. So the key is to do a little bit every day, and then you go ahead and you eat good foods and you sleep, and that becomes learning. And I think a lot of people think that learning is, well, I go work on a skill and then I get a little bit better at it. But the academic, how we measure that academically, or from a science perspective, is you have to be able to do a test. You have to do it ideally the next day. If you aren't better the next day, we don't really know if you've learned. It's called a practice effect if you just get better during that day. So during every lesson I give, I hope people improve, but I also know that sometimes I might grind them through a lesson and they might hit way more poor shots, but the next day or the next week they come back and they're better. And that's how I know that they're learning, if they improve over time. So I don't measure the success I see during a lesson in terms of golf balls, going towards the target. I want to see if I can prove my model of teaching players to be better over time. So that's really key to understand that definition of learning is not about improving in the moment. It's about getting better long term. And those two do not always relate, especially if you're training some difficult stuff. It's very different. So frequency and duration, I mean, that's basically the same idea as do short chunks and grind really hard. Your brain is fresher. That's a better way to train about it. We got to have a lot of diversity of tasks because you might be able to putt for an hour and a half and then you start to get tired of that for sure, right? I certainly do. But if you can do a little bit every day of driving, putting, short game, and playing, then you've got a nice variety pack. So much of how I generate practice plans for players is to give them a variety of tasks that will be engaging for them and challenging and fun. So other thing would be the challenge zone, which means we push you to the edge of what's comfortable. If the game gets a little bit easy and you're starting to beat it, move on. A great example would be, should you drain 3-footers all day long? Well, I don't believe in the 100 3-footers in a row. The only valuable thing to me about 100 3-footers in a row is that you're maybe training some mental stuff about getting a little tougher. But 2-footers don't make sense because we can make those generally. If you're having trouble, yes, go practice them. But we don't need to work on stuff that's easy. We need to be at the edge of what's comfortable. And as soon as we start to gain some confidence there, then we start changing it up and making it harder. And that's what adaptive learning is all about. Same idea with contextual interference. It's putting you in very uncomfortable spots. And we know, from a study perspective, that people perform poorly under pressure at every level. Even professionals actually perform worse under pressure than they do normally. And that's just the stats of it. And that's because it's harder to perform when you've got to think about an extra thing like the moment and the gravity of the moment. When it's a very difficult moment, that's adding more to your bucket of attention, which we're going to talk about next. So we need to train that way. We need to add a lot of complexity and diversity and challenging. And sometimes I'll have a student hitting balls and I want them to grind on something. And then I just go ahead and I interrupt them and I ask them how our class is going. Because I want them to be able to come in and out of being able to hit great shots, thinking about something else. Because I know on the golf course, they might have people ask them how our class is going. You got to be able to go in and out and focus right when you need to and be ready for that shot. Other really, really important thing here is, critical period. So you guys are all young and you have a great chance to learn, and the advantages of learning at your age are incredible. I teach a lot of older golfers and it just takes a lot longer to learn something. I had a golfer today that was a little cupped at the top and the ball was going right. And within about 10 or 15 minutes, started to get here. After about 20 minutes, she got it here. The ball started going left and she started drawing it. And it's amazing how quickly you can do that. So take advantage of the critical periods you have in terms of growing and getting this down. If you don't master golf to some degree by the time you're 20, it's very, very hard to get great. So take advantage of the time you have. Quarantine time can be valuable golf time. All right, so maximizing your kinematic sequence. We're going to talk a little more about that later. And then constant troubleshooting. So this idea of the golf ball is going to go right or left, and there's going to be a bias that might emerge, and you're always trying to correct that bias and get that golf ball to go straight. That is what makes you so good. Every day you dial it, and the faster you can dial it, the more long-term that that learning becomes, and the easier it is to pull out when you need it. So we're always working to challenge and basically guide this thing. Goes right, goes left, goes right, goes left, chunk, top, thin, whatever it is. We're always working on dialing that thing and getting rid of our biases and improving technique and structure so that it can be more repeatable. Periodization, that's all about training for technique in the winter and then playing in the summer, which I think is very important for all of us in Minnesota to have a good perspective on. I think in terms of maximizing your time, and we talked a little bit about some of this already, but when you're young, I think you really need to be focused on distance and create a decent golf swing. You have to be able to hit the ball hard if you want to succeed in this game. I'm a firm believer in that. At the highest levels, you need to smash it out there. And then you need to have all these other skills that I think are underappreciated skills of being able to chip, putt, and scramble and score. If you hit the ball 300 yards and hit 50% of your fairways, which is actually kind of my game, I mean, you really should be around par or better consistently. You don't have to hit it that straight if you can kind of not hit trees, not hit houses, and know not when to hit driver, it's good enough. You can score from there. You should be able to curve it around trees and do a lot of things. So I kind of teach the game backwards because I focus so much on the scoring. Because I think so much time is wasted on the driving range trying to perfect perfect swings, and perfect swings never happen over and over. You're gonna get a few here and there, but so often it's about a game of misses, right? Winter is technical work. That's when you really grind. And I mean, now I think it's time to talk a little bit about coronavirus and what's going on. You know, a lot of you, I feel really terrible for the high school and college golfers out there where your season just got cut super short. So I'm going to tell you, you have a chance to frame this how you want it to be. And I think you can look at it as an opportunity to get better and grind and grow and maybe get stronger. And you have a little extra kind of preseason prep time because there will be a golf season. I know there's going to be some sort of tournaments this summer. I've even heard rumors that even mid-May there's going to be a Heron Tour event. You know, if the quarantine's over and we're able to do that, there's going to be lots of little tournaments coming up. But for the next few weeks, I think you take the approach of let's try to grind on what I need to get to the next level and try to get a good structured plan going for practicing. And while you're doing all this, you know, it's all about process and effort over and over and over. And you'll hear me, you know, in my coaching, I just talk all about what we can control. You know, sometimes I ask kids the exercise of what are your goals, and they talk about winning tournaments. And I said, well, what if somebody shoots 59? Are you going to win? You know, you can't control what other people shoot. You can't control when your golf ball, you know, ends up in a bunker right underneath the lip, or you can't control when a bird grabs your ball and drops in the water or whatever. You know, some of this is so much beyond our control. All we can do is have a good process and good effort. And if we can do those things, we're going to get better every day over time. So last kind of key thing to my coaching would be like understanding feedback. And one of your coach's primary jobs is to teach you feedback. And occasionally I get players that come from other coaches where I can tell they haven't been taught feedback skills because they come in and they have maybe a bias of where they're hitting it on the face. Maybe they're hitting the toe or the heel and they don't know it, or the ball goes right or left and they can't fix it and they don't know how to change their shape. And if you are one of those players where you're kind of perfecting a swing, but you don't have the ability to change biases that emerge, biases when it does one thing or the other over and over, then you need to kind of reevaluate how you take that on and how you become flexible. Because if you can't fix these patterns quickly, you're not going to be able to adapt when you need to adapt. So that's a big part of how I coach. And every shot you hit is going to have some feedback to it. So when you hit a shot, you can feel, okay, you know, the tacit intrinsic feedback is, well, I chunked it, felt maybe it was a little heavy. Maybe it felt thin on the face or toey or heely. You could feel sometimes the face closing or opening. These are all things you can feel. And then you get the terminal feedback, which is where the golf ball goes, your divot direction, depth of divot. And then you can see where the grass stain on the golf ball is. And then you got this extra layer that can help you learn all these skills. But the sooner you can get rid of somebody telling you do it this way, the better off you are. You need to learn how to manage your own golf ball. And then your coach becomes a coach that does mental stuff with you, teaches you how to think about the golf course and think through your own emotions. And the coach becomes better at maybe winter work with technique. That's where it needs to go eventually. Now, if you're a 12, 13-year-old kid where you don't hit solid, there's tons of mechanical work to be done in the summer. Don't get me wrong, but once you're a high-level player, it becomes less mechanical and technical and becomes more about how to play the game and change speeds, change shape, be able to hit at different pins in different ways. So understand that your feedback is so key here, and your learning of that feedback loop is so important as you grow as a golfer. All right, attentional focus. This is I think a key one is understanding what you're thinking about. Should you think on the golf course? Well, I think you need to understand what is smart to think about on the golf course. If you know you've vetted a thought, meaning you've used it before and it's effective for you, then I think it's okay to think about it. But otherwise, you need to realize attention's like a bucket. You can only put so many things in that bucket. And as soon as that bucket gets over full, it starts falling apart. So if you're thinking about, okay, I got to think about my pre-shot routine. I got to think about, bowing my wrist at the top and closing the face at the bottom and getting my path inside out. And, oh, yeah, I worked on this on the range and it kind of worked, but now I'm in competition. Is it going to work? No, it's not going to work. You need more time to vet those thoughts. If they don't work well in practice, don't throw them on the golf course. And I think sometimes our golfers, we haven't grooved a move. So if you have a move that you've worked on and it becomes so innate, we call it automatic process here, where it becomes automatic, then it takes a very small amount of space in your bucket. And it sits down at the bottom of your bucket here, and it becomes so small. Think about these, attentional things are like, boulders. They become like grains of sand, and pretty soon it's just part of who you are. And that's the ideal place to operate at the highest level in competition, is where you just kind of react to your target and your environment, because there's plenty of stimulation in that environment to provide the right response. And if you even think about like how Navy SEALs are trained, this is a reaction thing. This is the training that's done hard enough that when the pressure's on, they're ready to hit the right shot. They're ready to do what they need to do. And that's how you train as a golfer. And that's what I focus on with my players is, let's make games that are very difficult, very stressful for you, that you're trying really hard to solve, so that when you're out there on the golf course, you know how to perform. And then the other part of this is, let's go focus on nothing but technique. And let's not care where that golf ball goes, but we're going to change what impact looks like. We're going to have a better, rate of face closure, and we're going to go ahead and kind of improve our shaft lane. And we don't care where this golf ball goes. So you need to learn how to switch between those two and understand that sometimes it's great to think, sometimes it's not great to think. And if you can master that, you're on the way to becoming kind of an effective practicer, but also a good player on the golf course. All right, mental game. Here we go. I'm going to jump in. This is my son, Leo, at age, I think he was about 2 here, early 2s. That's my other son, Gus, in the back.
Okay, let's see.
Here's Leo. So that's Leo before he developed any grit. He was frustrated early, and I know some of you, maybe you don't cry, but that's how your body language can act on the golf course. And I know what it's like because I've been there too. I'll be the first to admit I've broken golf clubs on the course, and I'm not proud of it. But there's times where we all get a little hot, and you might be one of those players where you can't control it. I know for a while it was very difficult for me. So you got to develop those skills and understand that mental skills must be practiced, and they're just like physical skills. So if you don't train properly with the mental side of it, you won't overcome them. So we've got some good strategies that we know work, and there's a lot of good advice out there. I'm not giving anything that's new, but I think have a good perspective of what the goals are, and your goal needs to be like a 5-year time frame of just getting better. And then that takes that moment of maybe you had a bad day or a bad hole into perspective, and it doesn't feel as important. So developing that what we call just kind of a growth mindset of, I'm just trying to get better at golf, and if I can get better today by getting a little tougher mentally and gutting through this, that makes me better. Maybe I don't have my A stuff, but I'm going to come out the best I can. And my college golf coach, Scott Davis, used to say, if all you got for me, Luke, is a 71, don't come back with a 72. Don't waste a stroke. But if all you have is 96, don't come back with a 97. Don't waste a golf shot. And that's one thing team golf does for us, because we have teammates depending on us. We need to go ahead and hang out everything we got on the line. We got to give it every bit we have. And we keep that attentional bucket that we just talked about. You don't let it overflow. You don't start thinking about stuff you don't need to think about. And you stay in that moment and hit every shot you can the best you can. And it's just letting up on 2 or 3, 4 shots around that can make a big difference between 4, 5, 6 strokes, right? And we all know that feeling of maybe not concentrating on a shot, and now you got a double. It happens so fast. And so you got to stay in the moment, and you got to go ahead and realize bad things are going to happen. Every single round, bad things happen. And it's how you deal with that and how you kind of react to that next moment. So here's Leo after working on some process stuff. Maybe this was after his nap, but a little bit better results. Let's see if I can get this one to play.
Here he goes. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And keep trying, you got it.
So there's Leo grinding through a tough moment. Maybe he wasn't hitting it good, but he didn't care. He kept trying. And that's going to be the golfer that comes out the best in the end. It's not the kid on the range with a sweet swing that's just puring it. It's the grinder, the kids that just keep trying. I coach a kid named Henry May, and Henry May turned into an incredible player. But I can honestly tell Henry, and he knows this too, that when he was a 9th grader, he would not the favorite to be the best player out of his group. He hit it kind of short, and the swing didn't look real pretty and mediocre on the greens. And now he's, an incredible player. And it's all because he just kept grinding and grinding and grinding and getting better. And he never lost confidence in his 5-year plan. And to this day, he's still an incredible golfer. All right, so developing some grit. So that's what this is all about, is getting tough and getting some grit. So what you need to do is have everybody in your life have a role. Your parents are there to support and encourage you and generally not coach you, but sometimes that can work well. But parents know when to back off. And that's really key when you got to go do your thing. But I think from a kid perspective, I would just say appreciate that your parents are so helpful for you. And if you can do that, I think, say, hey, thanks so much for giving me this opportunity. That's a good place to start. And parents tend to understand the role and most times. But coaches are there to coach. And I think a good coach is somebody that's going to push you and keep you accountable. So if you tell me, hey, I want to be a great player and I want to be the best player in Minnesota, I'm going to call you out when you don't practice on a rainy day. I'm going to tell you, if this is your goal, you are not aligning with that goal if you take a day off because it's raining. So, in terms of my coaching, if I've got a competitive player, I'm not going to cancel for rain ever again. Just grind through it, find a way to deal with it. And I think if you think about your coach as most good coaches are going to be tough on you and keep you accountable to who you need to be. And then a huge part of this is who you are, and you're developing your own narrative. And I'm hearing a lot of interesting things. And I'm just going to touch on one thing I'm hearing is that, school right now for a lot of you is really crazy and you're doing a lot of online stuff. And I'm hearing massive amounts of cheating going on. And my comment of that would be, you control who you are. And is that who you want to be? On the golf course, is it okay? No, right? And, GPA, I know colleges are going to look back at all these grades that people have out there. This is going to be a wash semester, right? And it's just a strange time. And you've got a chance to take advantage of this and come out with some, as much as you can, I guess, faith in yourself and understanding that you can work through a process here that's pretty difficult and make the most of it. Maybe you have more golf time. Maybe your classes are hard. But be the person you want to be and find a narrative that works for you. Be the person that's going to keep working hard and keep doing the right things, and you'll come out ahead in the end. I really believe that. So winning, does it really matter? I don't care if my players win. In fact, I think it's kind of a detriment in the early teen years if you're winning a lot, because all that changes when everybody hits puberty and everybody hits it hard. Then we kind of find out who's going to be the better players. Often the kid that hits it short and straight and still competes at age 13 is probably the best player when they're 18. So don't care too much about winning. To me, it's all about learning to compete and learning the skills and continuing to get better every day. That's everything in my book. And players that can develop grit and kind of this idea of get better every day, those are the ones that are going to be end up being the best players. All right, so now we're going to start focusing a little bit on speed here. Got about 15 minutes left. And kind of looking at how important speed is, because I'm going to talk to you about a product and a company that I started that I think will help you create speed. And here's some stats on how important speed is. So think about distance on the PGA Tour. The people that make the most money by far are the players that are bombing it out there. So if you can bomb at 300 to 320, you've got a much better chance of playing on the PGA Tour. And I think the same applies even at the local level. When you think about handicap levels, distance is really key there. If you can bang it out there, you have a much better chance to have a shorter club in. So let's say you're playing a 420-yard hole and you can hit it 320, you got a sand wedge in. If your drive is, 220, you got 200 yards left, you got 3-wood. I mean, you got no chance here. So you have to work on distance all the time. And, it just shows up in scoring as well. And some interesting stats have come out. Mark Brody, a guy, wrote a book called Every Shot Counts. It's a really cool book if you want to learn about tour stats and distance and what's going on. And the biggest takeaway was that the myth of drive for show, putt for dough was just blown out of the water. Putting accounts for only about 5% of how well a player does on the PGA Tour. It's a small chunk, and that's because putting matters for winning a single event. If you have a hot putter, you have a better chance to win, but putting yourself in a position week after week with good ball striking and long drives gives you a much better chance to win. So driving is probably actually the most important part of the game, along with being a pretty good mid-iron player, which is just stats that, 20 years ago, nobody would have, thought you were a sane person if you said that, but being able to hit a green from 150 yards and being able to drive it fairly long are the most important things in the game, probably. Not that you don't have to chip and putt. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you have to be able to smash it and you have to be able to hit some good iron shots in there. That's how you score. So here's a couple players that have done a huge distance kind of grind the last couple of years. And this guy's name is Padraig Harrington. If you know him, you're probably one of the older players here, because Padraig was a great player in the early and mid 2000s. I think about 2007 or 2008. And then he's kind of been, haven't heard of too much of him in the last about eight years or so. But look at all the tools he's created for working on club head speed. And he talks about it. This is from an Instagram post he made. He's got an axe in there. I mean, this guy is doing everything he can to hit a little farther, and his club head speed's about 112, hits about 300 yards. He's obsessed with it. Here's a guy named Bryson DeChambeau, who is, the modern golf technician, somebody who's working really hard to hit it farther now. And he might be the smartest player on the PGA Tour, and this is what he's working on. He's thinking about putting a long drive setup in there, and his club head speed's gone up about 6 miles an hour in the last 5 months, and he's just grinding. I think he's put on 40 pounds of muscle in the last year, and he says he wants to go another 20 or 30 to get to 270. So he's training like a linebacker, although a linebacker for speed, not for just brute strength, because he knows that golf courses get so much shorter if you can hit it 370 versus 320. So it's crazy how far these guys are taking the analytics and working on speed because they know it's so important. Here's Tony Finau. This is his swing that goes about 320 on the left. If you watched him, he played really well in the majors last year. That's the driver swing he was using. And his ball speed was like 182. And then this is the swing he was working on this winter where his ball speed was, 200. He could just kill it. And so it'll be interesting to see once we're golfing again, PGA Tour is golfing, if all these guys can play with this. But I can tell you, if you can swing hard, even short golf courses where we think short hitters have an advantage, the truth is, Tony Finau and Bryson DeChambeau, if they need to hit a 270, well, that's a 3-iron or a 2-iron for them. They can hit more fairways than maybe Corey Pavin could hit driver. So the advantage you have in distance is extraordinary. You need to use it smart, and it doesn't mean hit driver all the time, but understand that speed is going to be king in this game. And I think this is where the game is going. This is the future of the game. I really believe that everybody's going to focus on speed here, in the future. Here's Mickelson. I think 50 years old, and he's bombing it, hitting it as hard as he ever has in his entire life. And backswing's really long, lifts his front heel a little bit. He's pounding it out there, and all he cares about is hitting bobs. And if one of the best players he's probably the second best player in the last 30 years, is focusing still so much on distance. I think it's a pretty key thing. It's very telling. So what we did, and I'm fortunate to work at Interlochen where I have some great tools and I've got a research background, is we started to put together a plan, and I've been working on this now for a couple of years about how we can help people create distance, because I realized this trend was coming, and frankly, I wanted my players to capitalize on it, and I wanted to see if we could get some great results. So we started using our technology. We've got some force plates. We got K-Vest. Don't use K-Vest too much, but I do use it sometimes. And the force plates are fantastic for seeing how you can use the ground. And you can obviously track with TrackMan. So we created a really cool study here. We had 85 people in it. We charted out the strength you might have in some physical tests, which some of these are from TPI, if you guys know TPI, but how far you can toss a medicine ball chest pass, and then overhead, and then vertical jump, and then hand strength. And we charted out how important these factors were. And we found out that they were all important, but when you put them all together, you get a pretty good picture of how far somebody's going to hit the golf ball, and you can create this really cool model. So then you can predict, okay, so if this person has this amount of strength, this is about how fast they could swing. And then if they don't swing that fast, it's very easy to kind of look at that and see why. And in our case, what we found was you can look at it directly at their sequence. And the sequence is how you move your body and how you use the ground and how you rotate and how you use your wrist for leverage. And it's super easy to predict, and it's a quick, low-hanging fruit if you don't have it. So some of these people don't have a whole lot of speed, even though they're fairly strong. And I had a guy, actually a professional race car driver, that was, he was swinging about, 100, 101. And we got him on a plan, and the guy was super strong. He was working out. He had a fitness trainer 3 days a week, and he's 6'2", so he's a strong guy. And we got him the right plan, and we worked on the sequencing, and now he can swing it at 116, 117, and that's in about 2 years. So he picked up, like 40, 50 yards in 2 years. His handicap went way down. He has all these wedges into greens, and he doesn't even feel like he needs to hit well to score well. So not everybody's in that category, but we know that some people need to work on strength. Some people need to work more on just creating speed and leveraging the ground better. Some people need to work on wrist angles. It's a very predictable thing once you look into it. So where does the speed come from? Here's Rory. He's right now world #1. Fantastic driver of the ball. So we don't need the music. But, you can see his ground force stuff is fantastic if you know what that means. So watch the belt buckle. Watch how he kind of does a big backswing, then he kind of crouches and he gets that weight over the front foot. And there's some serious loading into that front foot. And then he's pushing and twisting off the ground. And he starts pushing right about here. This is the point where you start to see most players pushing the hardest is when that left arm is about perpendicular or parallel to the ground. That's when they start pushing the hardest. And the kinematic sequence starts to really go off. And this is where you see that transfer of the energy up from the ground through the hips into the core, transferring to body rotation. And then the last phase is it goes down the arms into the wrists and then the club. And if you do this properly, you can just smash it out there. You don't even need to be that strong of a person if you're efficient. So you can see some huge drives out of guys like Rory. And Rory's not the only guy. I've got a little guy I coach, Andrew. Andrew is 104 pounds, and his club head speed is 104. It's amazing stuff. He went from upper 80s to 104 in about a year. Obviously, growing helps, but super, super good stuff. I'm going to highlight one thing that a lot of people that pound it really hard do, and here's Andrew. Watch. Oops. Andrew actually lowers his spine down. Whoops, sorry. Some technical difficulties here. Andrew lowers right as he gets to the top. Watch how his head and chest go down. And you can see that same thing Rory does. And then he pushes. And look at that nice flat plane. If you can't shallow the plane, then you can't use the ground because you're going to jam the club right into the ground. So there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into speed. And that's what we thought about when we're starting to create our plan here in our company, which I'm going to talk to you about. Is these are all trainable things. If you don't know how to shallow the club and use the ground, it's trainable. And a lot of people I know growing up, I didn't have any, I knew how to jump, but I had a steep plane, so I just had to get out of the way. And these are things that you can train. And I would say golf is moving towards a point where there's going to be less people grinding on the range, trying to find it and figure out how to hit the golf ball. There's less experimenting. There's more time creating a golf swing away from the golf ball and saying, okay, this is my technique time. And for me, it's all about the speed training with technique. So I combine, just trying to swing hard and create great kinematics, which is how your body works in order, but also trying to get the club to do the right stuff so that you can actually hit it straight. And that's what's different. There's a great company out there, Super Speed Golf, created the speed sticks, and kind of, as I see it, created the industry. They don't focus as much on mechanics as how I would do it, but I've got a much more teaching background. So I want people to hit it far and straight. And so that's how our plans are designed, to help you learn how to leverage the ground, rotate, and use your wrists, which are the 3 functions that you have to have. So we created a company called ripstick.com. And this is the tool we created. Super Speed has 3 sticks. We have 1 stick, but you just take these little weights out. So you don't have to carry around multiple sticks. 1 stick will do it all. And the science behind it's really solid. So basically, if you can take something that's a little lighter and swing it much faster because it's lighter, it trains your body to swing harder. And then if you take something a little bit heavier, you're training your body to basically deal with that extra mass, and you're going to develop different muscles. And very generally, I would say this approach has been very, very effective with picking up speed. And we've seen it. It came actually from the world of baseball back in the 90s. And even in the 80s, people started doing research on picking up bat speed. And now it's become just common. They're doing what we call overweight and overspeed training. So here's the quick little little infomercial from my
Hey golfers, my name is
website.
Luke Benoit. I'm a PGA Pro and the inventor and president of the Ripstick. The Ripstick is a brand new speed training tool that allows you to take one stick and change the weight very quickly. You can take this cap and twist it, take the weights out, and you're all set for what we call overspeed training. Put it back in, and you're locked and loaded for what we call overweight training. It's got some holes in the end, so you can hear a really cool swishing sound when you swing it. And from that, we develop crazy custom speed training plans for everybody. If all you want to do is hit it farther, we've got a plan for you. If you also want to work on some swing flaws and improve your swing, we've got a plan for you too. So we've already seen a lot of tour pros that are interested in putting it in the bag because they don't want to carry around multiple sticks, and I imagine you might be the same way as well. So check us out at ripstick.com. You should expect 10 to 25 yards of increase in distance in as little as 2 months of training. So check us out and look forward to hitting a little farther in 2020.
So that's the commercial. And if you guys are interested, what I've been able to do now is create some really good fitness plans. So let's say you don't really know what you want to do as far as working out, or maybe you've tried a program and you haven't kept it up. We're doing a plan here where I'll send you the program and I'll keep you accountable because I can see if you do the plan or not. I use an app to see if you're doing it, and I can give you great stuff. I would want you to send me a video of your swing. I'm not going to judge your swing. I'm just going to say, based on your swing, this is probably how you should be working out. Because I can very easily say, okay, your lower body's weak, your upper body's weak, maybe your core is weak, whatever that is, there's probably 3 different factors there. You can see it's written all over your golf swing. I know that because we've done so much research on this stuff. You can look at a swing and do this. And then you can develop a plan and get strong, and you can also do the stick if you want to as well. So, and sometimes I'm really honest with people. If they have a great sequence and their body's working really well, I might not even care about working on the speed stuff. At that point, it's injury prevention and it's making sure that you don't move your body improperly, and strengthening around your core may be more useful. So I'm really honest with people if I don't think I can help them. But for a lot of people, the speed training is going to be really helpful, and you can pick up some serious distance. So if you ask around your buddies, around the golf community, people that have done the overspeed and overweight training, I think you'll hear some amazing things about it. It does work, and what we've done is just kind of customize it for people a little bit more individually. So check that out. If you want to sign up, and get the stick, check it out on the website. No pressure. We've sold through almost all the sticks we have at this point. We've got a couple left, and we're going to get more because we've had some pretty good demand. And we do have at least one tour player that's putting this in their bag, top 50 player in the world. And we've only sent it out to a few people. People love the idea of 1 stick versus 3. And if it does the job, it's fantastic. So that's the idea. Kind of coming back to, what's going to make you great. So many different ways to swing. Almost all these players hit it hard. Not everybody, but it's a variety. And I'll come back to this thing. It's about drive and structure. And from age 13 and on, these players pretty much train like pros. And I'm not saying you have to practice 40 hours a week, but what I am saying is when you do have your 5 or 10 or whatever hours of practice a week you have, use that time wisely if your goals are to be great. If you want to be a leisure golfer, that's a completely different discussion, but use that time wisely. Learn to adapt and develop some incredible mental skills, because all these players learned how to get really tough mentally and find a way to score even on the bad days. So there's a lot of things that you can draw from these great players, which have some very different swings. And I think that's the big message I have for you today is you don't have to have a perfect swing. You have to have a functional swing. So last little point here, here's Wayne Gretzky, hockey's best player ever. What makes a champion? In hockey, they had a really interesting study about, in Canada, that the year you enter is the year you have to play, or in terms of your birthday. So if you're a January, you're competing against every kid that's born January, December. So January kids get to play against December kids. And if you're born in January versus December, because you're going to be one of the bigger kids, it's called the relative age effect. You're going to be the bigger kid on your team. You're going to get more training. You're going to get more ice time. And pretty soon you just start getting better and better and better, get more and more opportunity. Your chances of making it into the NHL are way more than double what the kid that's born in December are. And that's just based on your birthday, which might be 1 day off. So much of this seems like stuff that's beyond our control. And that's your environment. There's things you can't control. But at the same time, I think about this kid that's growing up, and he's one of the best putters I've ever seen. And the kid's never going to probably own a pair of golf shoes, but he's going to win a lot of money just putting in his Crocs there. You can overcome so much, and so much of this is about the narrative you create and your choice there. So I know I'm not, maybe everybody's coach out there, but I just encourage you just to find somebody that can help you with that plan and find a way to reach the goals you want to. Be accountable to those so that you can get the most out of your game. So last thing is, I might follow up with an email here, and I'm just going to ask you guys, super quick little form. I'll ask you kind of, what do you think about future seminars? Are these helpful? And what areas are you interested in? If you want to get a ripstick, very cool. Certainly understand if you want to do some stuff on your own. Home setups, if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to consult with that. I know every single simulator out there because we did a ton of research for our place at Interlochen, and I know what can work really well for home stuff. So I'm always happy to help, and I'll consult, no charge. Shoot me an email and say, hey, what do you think I should get? I've got this sort of budget. I can give you some really good ideas, camera-based, TrackMan, or radar-based, whatever it is. Coaching recommendations, I don't have a ton of room to take on new students, but sometimes I do. To me, it's all about situation and what's going on. But I'm also good with coaching recommendations and saying who is in your area, who could be good for you to work with. If you want a sample practice plan, I can send that out too. And I'm happy to show you kind of how I structure it for a week-long practice. You tell me how many hours a week you want, and then I get you a plan. And then the last thing is, like, if you're one of those kids where you're in a situation where maybe financially you're in a tough spot, maybe your parents are laid off and you love golf and you want to grind on it, I can promise you I or one of my buddies will take you on as a coach. It's something I firmly believe in. Like, I don't want any kid that really wants to be great to be, hung up from financial means here. So that's something that I always keep in mind. Like, if you want to get great, there are resources out there for you, and I will help you achieve this, because I'm so impressed with the kids that want to work hard and see great things with their game. So ultimately, I think a big thing in golf is, if you can learn this skill through golf of how to grind and work through the hard stuff, it can be super helpful for everything in life. So it transfers so well, and that's what you see with the players maybe that play professionally but then end up doing something else. They're going to be so great at whatever they do because they've learned how to work through the hard stuff and develop some grit. So that's why I think it's super valuable, and it makes you a better human when you can go through that. So hopefully I'm not kind of overstepping my bounds, but that's kind of my view on it. And I appreciate your time. I'm sorry I went a little bit over. Some of you are probably getting excited for the NFL draft, the first live event in a long time. So I'm going to look to see if there's any questions here. Otherwise, I will cut us loose here.